All right, let's dive into one of the most chaotic, most cautionary tales in the history of big data projects. We're talking about a single weekend that spiraled into a $330 million IT disaster for a major bank. So picture this. It's April 2018, and the British bank TSB decides to flip the switch on this huge, ambitious technology project. But instead of a smooth, seamless upgrade, the whole system just went into total meltdown. It pretty much set a brand new benchmark for just how badly a large-scale data migration can go. So what was TSB even trying to do? Well, the plan itself was actually pretty bold. They wanted to get full control over their own technology, to finally stand on their own 2 feet after being spun off from Lloyd's banking group. And this wasn't just any project. This was the big one, a core banking migration. They had to move 1.3 billion, that's billion with a B, customer records from the old, stable Lloyd's platform to a brand new system called Proteo4UK. It was built by their new parent company, Sabadell. You know, this is basically the digital equivalent of open heart surgery for a bank. It's one of the riskiest things you can do in IT. And this slide, wow, this really just says it all, doesn't it? The gap between what they hoped for and what actually happened is just staggering. On one side, you have the promise, save a bunch of money, get independence. And on the other, you have the reality, a staggering bill, a total loss of control, and just weeks and weeks of absolute chaos for millions of people. The whole migration was scheduled for a single weekend. The idea was, a quick and clean switch. Turn it off Friday, turn it back on Monday, and everything's new and shiny. But as soon as the system went live, it pretty much went dark. The new Proteo4UK system just couldn't handle it. It buckled immediately. Reports started flooding in. Customers were completely locked out of their accounts. The mobile app, which, let's be honest, is how most of us bank these days, was crashing constantly. And that forced thousands of people into physical branches, which were, of course, completely and totally overwhelmed. So this technical failure, it wasn't just a tech problem. It immediately turned into a massive human and financial crisis. And the numbers that came out in the weeks after, they're just mind-boggling. They really paint a picture of just how big this catastrophe was. Nearly 2 million people. Just let that sink in for a second. 1.9 million customers were suddenly totally cut off from their own money. They couldn't pay their bills, they couldn't check their balances, they couldn't do anything. And the price tag for this mess? Immense. Over £250 million. And that was just for paying customers back and trying to fix the broken system. It's just a colossal price to pay for a failed IT project. Now, a crisis this big doesn't just stay in the IT department. Oh no, the fallout went straight to the very top. It led to the CEO, Paul Pester, having to resign. And it even triggered a full-blown investigation by the UK Parliament. This thing became a national incident. And this is where you see the real-world pain behind all those big numbers. This wasn't just some inconvenience. People's mortgage applications were stopped in their tracks. Small businesses couldn't pay their employees. And this is terrifying, some customers logged in and saw the account details of complete strangers. The damage to trust was just profound. So the big question is, how? How could a project this important go so spectacularly wrong? We really have to deconstruct the causes, because the mistakes TSB made are powerful lessons for anyone in any company trying to do a big digital transformation. When all the dust settled and the official investigations were done, they all came back with a strikingly similar conclusion. It basically boiled down to 2 massive problems. The project was dangerously rushed, and the oversight from the top was just completely inadequate. And you can see this chain reaction right here. It was a perfect storm of critical errors. Because the timeline was so aggressive, they just couldn't do the proper testing. The new system, which was probably designed for a whole different banking market, was never actually validated at the scale it needed to be for 2 million UK customers. And on top of all that, TSB put way too much faith in its parent company, Sabadell, and didn't have nearly enough of its own backup plans. In the aftermath, TSB's meltdown became one of the most studied IT failures of our time. From the rubble of this project, we got an invaluable blueprint on how not to manage a critical data migration. And these takeaways, they're now basically gospel in the world of financial tech. You just don't do a big bang migration like this anymore without a phased rollout and a solid plan to go back if things go wrong. You have to test and retest at full scale. And, crucially, the board is on the hook for oversight. You can't just outsource that kind of risk. Regulators now demand proof that you're resilient, not just a slick presentation about how ambitious you are. And that really leaves us with this final critical question. The TSB disaster is just such a stark reminder that while the push to modernize and innovate is absolutely essential, it has to be balanced with a rigorous, almost obsessive focus on resilience and planning. Because when you're dealing with people's money and their data, the cost of failure is just way too high.